At the edge of a winter road, tires taller than a man shoulder a weight that should not move. No fanfare, only breath in the cold and a steady diesel rhythm. A tank rides chained, a gun trails obediently, and the column keeps its counsel. The Scammell Pioneer does not dazzle, it delivers. It was built for the miles between the headlines, for the stuck, the broken, the bogged, the almost lost. When campaigns faltered on mud, gradient, axle and track, this blunt-nosed giant turned immobility into momentum. Across Britain's lanes and Europe's ravaged roads, it answered the same unglamorous question: who will do the heavy lifting? In a war of movement, it was the machine that made movement possible. Long before sirens sounded over London, the British Army understood a hard truth. Battles are won by forces that can move, and won't stop moving when the ground conspires against them. The First World War had taught it brutally. When roads dissolved into ruts, cavalry could no longer compensate, and lorries could not cope. Between the wars, industry pursued payload and road speed, yet the War Office kept its eye on the unsolved problem: traction where roads ended, and recovery when machines failed. In 1938, the problem and its provisional answer stood together. A 60-pounder gun, long, stern and stubborn, was hitched to a Scammell tractor. What mattered was not glamour, but geometry, weight distributed across broad tires, torque delivered at low revs, a chassis that could flex without folding. The photograph from that year captures the tone, a work of leverage rather than spectacle. It is not the gun that commands attention, but the tractor that refuses the landscape's veto. The logic hardened as rearmament gathered pace. Britain's mechanized strength, tanks, field artillery, ammunition columns, would be multiplied only if each element could be brought to bear where needed and removed when crippled. If a 25-ton tank slid nose down into a drainage ditch, it was not merely an inconvenience. It was a tactical void, a blocked road, a lost fighting vehicle, a morale drain. To prevent compound loss, the Army needed a specialist with 3 vocations in one: artillery haulage for weight, tank transport for bulk, and recovery for the inevitable wreck. Then came France. In the spring of 1940, the British Expeditionary Force tried to wage a modern war with a road network that collapsed under stress, and with weather that chose sides. Engines overheated, clutches burned, tires buried themselves to the hubs, bridges failed. What men remembered were not sweeping manoeuvres, but stoppages, immobilized batteries, columns halted by one lorry sideways in the mud. In those days, the Scammell Pioneer appeared not as a novelty, but as a remedy. A few, too few, hauled guns out of mire and dragged wounded armour rearwards, inch by stubborn inch. Dunkirk sharpened the lesson beyond doubt. In retreat, the calculus of recovery grows merciless. Every vehicle rescued is a replacement not needed. Every tank hauled to the beach is industrial time saved. Every gun retrieved is firepower restored for the defence to come. The Pioneer proved it could reverse despair, literally, by pulling the unpullable. It was a machine that multiplied the value of everything around it, because it guaranteed a second chance for expensive things that had failed for trivial reasons. Back in Britain, training depots filled with vehicles and intent. On parade grounds and test courses, young drivers learned a new discipline. Steering was heavy, gearing required patience, braking demanded foresight. The cab gave little comfort and plenty of information: pedal feel, lever throw, winch noise. The Pioneer did not flatter a novice, it taught him. Crews drilled anchoring the rear spade, paying out cable with care, snubbing and re-snubbing a load when angles changed. They measured success not in speed, but in control: how to begin a pull, how to sense when the soil would shear, when to stop before failure. The doctrine that emerged was modest and fierce. Accept that things will break. Assume the ground will not cooperate. Plan for recovery as an integral act, not an afterthought. The Pioneer made that doctrine credible. By marrying a long-legged ladder chassis to a patient diesel and an honest winch, Scammell had supplied the army with a countermeasure to friction itself. Where decay invaded plans, mud, sand, soft verges, collapsed culverts, the Pioneer reclaimed utility from ruin. No one celebrated it then. Photographs show it at the frame of the picture, half seen behind a gun team, visible only as a bonnet and a pair of tyres, the indispensable presence in an image whose caption concerns something else. Yet the logic of the war quietly pivoted upon it. The more complex the force became, radios, optics, armour, hydraulics, the more essential became the one machine designed to fetch complexity back to the line. Necessity had found its muscle. The army would soon formalise the relationship and scale it across all theatres. In some, the need was not a single requirement, but a chain. Move heavy things under poor conditions. Recover the priceless when they fail. Do both repeatedly, without drama. By 1940, the Scammell Pioneer had shown that this chain could hold. The question was no longer whether such a vehicle was desirable, but how many Britain could build in time. The War Office did not ask for elegance, it asked for certainty. Scammell's engineers, veterans of commercial heavy haulage, answered with proportion rather than panache. The R100 artillery tractor, ancestor to the recovery variants, shows the design grammar plainly. A bonnet with no interest in streamlining, arches wide for flotation, a cab that prioritizes visibility and approach angle, a frame proportioned like a bridge, depth for stiffness, length for leverage. Everything about it suggests the same sentence: keep pulling. At the heart, a Gardner 6-cylinder diesel, no supercharger, no theatrics. Its virtues were endurance and torque at low engine speeds, delivered through a gearbox that favoured control over haste. The layout adopted a 6x4 format, 3 axles, with the rear pair driven. The front axle steers without drive, preserving complexity for where it matters. On poor ground, the combination of broad cross-country tyres, long wheelbase, and weight distribution yields traction that seems to defy the surface. The driver's senses become instruments, clutch take-up as information, wheel tug as feedback, engine note as gauge. The recovery vision developed alongside the artillery role. The SV-1S and later SV-2S variants added the features that turned a tractor into a rescuer: a central winch rated to haul beyond its nominal figure, a rear spade that bit the earth to convert the whole machine into an anchor, a jib to lift and rig, stowage for chains, snatch blocks, shackles, and timber. The vehicle became a rolling kit of mechanical advantage, not power alone, but the means to multiply it. Doctrine sharpened accordingly. The founding principle of the newly formed Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, REME, would later be summarised as "keep the punch in the fight." In practice, it meant recover forward when safe, repair at the earliest line, return assets to action as quickly as possible. Do not allow easily repaired faults to become write-offs through delay or mishandling. The Pioneer fit that doctrine as a glove fits a hand. It could reach the fault, rig the pull, make the lift, and extract the asset without demanding exotic support. Training photographs from the home front capture the ethos. Men stand beside vehicles that dwarf them, yet there is no swagger, only method. A driver points at the ground where the spade will hold. A corporal checks a shackles pin. A sergeant watches cable layers keep turns tight on the drum. Everything is pared down to function. The sensory palette is minimal and exact. The scrape of the spade as it sets, the click of a safety pawl, the diesel's subdued beat. These sounds become a vocabulary of assurance. Strategically, the Pioneer sat at the hinge between firepower and sustainment. A gun of great weight without a tractor is an encumbrance. A tank without recovery is a future obstacle. By guaranteeing both mobility and retrieval, the Scammell helped the army take calculated risks. Commanders could commit armour into terrain close to the limit of prudence, knowing that a recovery plan existed in reality, not only on a map. This confidence had consequences. Units pushed through soft ground that would otherwise have been bypassed. Positions were held because immobilized vehicles could be extracted under cover of darkness. Bridges were crossed where approaches were dubious because a puller stood ready if judgment erred. The vision extended beyond battlefield acts to the national economy of war. A rescued tank returns not only as mass, but as time. Time not spent forging new plate, machining new gear sets, training new crews. In Britain's constrained industrial base, the Pioneers' labour became an invisible subsidy to innovation elsewhere. Resources spared for radar, for engines, for aircraft. It is no exaggeration to say that careful recovery policy, embodied by vehicles like the Pioneer, helped the nation husband steel and skill for decisive technologies. Above all, the Pioneer's vision was to make reliability the hero. It is an unfashionable idea, but history vindicates it. The machine rarely failed, and when it did, it failed legibly, inviting repair rather than replacement. Mechanics could reach what they needed to reach. The electrics were simple, the plumbing plain, the fasteners standard. This was design as comradeship, an engineer meeting a fitter halfway. As mobilization accelerated, Scammell's production adapted. Shifts lengthened, blackout curtains dulled the windows, women took stations at rivet guns and presses. Completed vehicles left with paint scarcely dry, bound for depots where numbers became units and units became plans. The Pioneer did not aspire to be admired. It aspired to be present, whenever and wherever movement threatened to stop. That was the vision, a dependable answer to the oldest battlefield question: how do we keep going? In the Watford works of Scammell lorries, the war became audible in rhythm and repetition, the steady clatter of hammers, the bite of drills, the hiss of acetylene. No ceremony attended the building of giants, only method. Steel arrived in sheets and girders, lifted by cranes whose operators worked by hand signal and instinct. Chassis frames lay in rows upon wooden blocks, half assembled, awaiting axles and power plants. The Gardner diesels came in crates marked with serial numbers and the scent of grease. Each was lowered into its cradle by chain hoist, bolted down with care rather than haste. Every Pioneer was assembled as if the builder expected to repair it himself in a field. Components were over-engineered but accessible, tolerances practical rather than delicate. The wiring looms were simple, the clutch linkage exposed and strong. Nothing decorative survived the blueprint stage. A Scammell was built to outlast complaint. As demand surged, production adapted. Blackout cloth hung across the factory windows. The roof shook when bombers passed overhead. Work never stopped. Night shifts turned rivet guns into the heartbeat of industry. Women learned to drive pneumatic drills, to swing sledgehammers, to weld. On the shop floor the air was hot and purposeful. Every finished chassis carried fingerprints in its paint. By 1941, the Pioneer was leaving the factory at a pace that mirrored Britain's desperation. Some went straight to docks for shipment to Egypt, others to training grounds across the Midlands. The War Office, accustomed to theoretical production charts, found itself counting trucks by name, not number. In theatre, the first test was endurance. The North African desert punished every mechanical conceit. Heat swelled metal, sand infiltrated bearings, fuel boiled in its lines. Yet the Pioneer endured. Its broad tyres pressed gently over soft sand, its torque crawled through dunes, its winch pulled with patient inevitability. The men who drove it began to trust it as one trusts a fellow soldier, not because it was perfect, but because it was predictable. Reports came home. Vehicle reliable in all conditions. Winch performance beyond expectation. Requires minimal maintenance if filters kept clean. In a campaign that devoured machinery, this was high praise indeed. The build had succeeded not because it chased innovation, but because it embraced wisdom. The Pioneer's design rejected complexity as vanity. Every bolt could be turned with standard spanners. Every failure taught a lesson without penalty. In photographs from North Africa, it stands among the tanks and transports like a patient ox amid racehorses. Not fast, not graceful, but still there when the dust settles. Its endurance was the measure of its creation the proof of Britain's industrial perseverance. Tunisia, 1943. A tank lies crippled in a wadi, its track half buried, turret twisted. The order comes quietly. Fetch a pioneer. Within the hour it appears, blunt, confident, and slow. The men riding its open cab know the procedure by heart. The rear spade drops, biting earth. The winch engages. The cable spools out with the dry rasp of tension. A shackle clicks home. The driver nudges the throttle, feeling the vibration climb through the pedals. The cable hums. The tank shudders. A sound somewhere between groan and sigh marks the moment resistance yields. Scenes like this replayed from Tripoli to Cassino. In one theatre it was sand, in another mud. The geometry of effort remained the same. The Pioneer bridged the physical with the mechanical, converting torque and patience into motion. In Italy, mountain passes tested traction. Heavy guns bogged on gradients where engines overheated and tires slipped. The Pioneer climbed methodically, inching forward under full load, its rear twin axles clawing at shale. Drivers spoke of steering not as control, but as persuasion, easing the wheel, reading the surface, letting the truck find its own equilibrium. When weather turned foul, the Pioneers worked in pairs, leapfrogging, one anchoring, the other pulling. It was an improvised ballet of chain and grit. Even when they failed to recover a vehicle outright, they cleared roads, shifted blockages, freed convoys. Each mission was an exercise in faith. Drivers could not see the end of their cable in darkness. They judged strain by sound. Engineers measured their success by what did not remain stuck the next morning. The Pioneer's contribution cannot be reduced to tonnage recovered. It kept formations coherent. A tank retrieved in time meant a squadron restored to fighting strength. A bridge cleared meant a column still advancing. Without such continuity, campaigns dissolve into stranded fragments. When historians describe the Eighth Army's advance, they speak of courage, coordination, supply. Behind those abstractions was a steel constant with 6 wheels and an 8-ton winch. The Pioneer was the muscle in the silence after battle, the sound of salvage, the proof that retreat need not mean loss. Through Tunisia, Sicily, and Italy, it performed beyond its specifications. Engineers noted that when rated for 9 tons, it could pull 12 if the ground held. Its gearboxes were overbuilt, its cooling systems generous. In short, it was a machine that forgave mistakes and rewarded discipline. By the war's midpoint, the Scammell Pioneer had ceased to be an experiment. It was doctrine made manifest, a machine trusted wherever movement met resistance. June 1944 brought the greatest test. The Allied invasion of Normandy was a feat of logistics as much as of courage. To push inland through wrecked villages and waterlogged fields required not only tanks that could fight, but machines that could recover them when they faltered. Every advance depended upon continuity. Every halt threatened to stall an army. The Scammell Pioneer was already a veteran. It rolled from landing craft onto beaches choked with debris, its open cab splashed by the same surf that carried invasion craft. From that moment until the war's end, it was never far from the front line of motion. In the lanes of Normandy, where hedgerows hid both allies and ambushes, it performed miracles of extraction. One report tells of a Churchill tank lying nose first in a crater too deep for winch angle. Engineers rigged 2 Pioneers in tandem, spade-anchored opposite each other. Slowly, the tank rose, slewed, and rolled free, its treads churning the earth that had trapped it. No cheers, only a nod between drivers before they moved to the next wreck. The Remy workshops that followed the advance built their schedules around the Scamell's rhythm. A single vehicle could retrieve 3 tanks in a night if roads remained open. Its speed was poor, 20 miles an hour at best, but reliability filled the gap. Commanders learned to plan for it. The slow convoy behind the fast one, the mechanical conscience of the campaign. Inevitably, faults emerged. The unarmoured cab left crews exposed to shell fire and snipers. The long bonnet made concealment difficult. As German guns reached inland, recovery became an act of courage. Half-track American tractors arrived, promising protection and speed, yet many broke where the Scammell persisted. It was heavy, old-fashioned, stubborn, and indispensable. In Poland's contingent of the Allied drive, the 1st Armoured Division adopted Pioneers to tow both British and captured German armour. Photographs from the campaign show their silhouettes against the bocage, identical in every nation's hands, utilitarian, unjudging, faithful to physics alone. When the front crossed the Seine and raced toward the Rhine, the Pioneers followed. They crossed bridges they had helped to mend, hauled knocked-out Shermans from ditches to clear the road for new ones. By VE Day, few of these machines remained pristine. Many had bent fenders, patched tyres, exhausts wired in place. But they still started, still pulled. Their success was measured not in glory, but in continuity. Proof that progress was possible only because something patient followed behind. The Scammell Pioneer never failed the war. If it had a failure, it was only that history forgets what does not glitter. The machine's greatness lay in its refusal to dramatize itself. It worked, and in working, it won. The war's end revealed consequences invisible to its participants. Every tank recovered, every gun towed back from failure represented resources saved, steel, labour, and time. Britain's economy, strained to breaking point, depended on such quiet thrift. Each Scammell Pioneer was, in effect, a mobile factory of conservation. Records from the Ministry of Supply estimate that a single recovery of a heavy tank preserved 15 tons of metal and months of manufacturing effort. Multiplied across campaigns, the arithmetic approaches the fantastic, a logistical miracle born not of invention but of diligence. The industrial echo was profound. Factories freed from replacing losses could concentrate on progress, jet engines, radar arrays, new alloys. Thus, the vehicle that never left the ground of battle indirectly lifted Britain into the technological age that followed. At the human scale, its influence spread through skill. The men and women who built and maintained the Pioneer carried their craft into peace. Welders became bridge builders. Riveters joined the post-war construction boom. Mechanics found employment in the civil transport revolution. The discipline of practical engineering learned under duress became a civic virtue. Then, almost overnight, the Pioneer disappeared from the Army's future. Surplus sales in 1946 sent hundreds to civilian haulage firms. On rural roads, olive drab turned to company livery. Winches hauled logging wagons instead of Shermans. A few travelled to colonies, where they pulled graders, oil rigs, or stranded buses. The transformation was complete. War's servant turned empire's labourer turned peacetime relic. When London celebrated victory, rows of artillery thundered past Buckingham Palace. In the background of photographs from the parade stands the Scammell Pioneer, unadorned, unmentioned, but present as always. It had outlasted its necessity, which is the quiet triumph of every good tool. And then came forgetting. Newer vehicles bore armour, greater horsepower, closed cabs, pneumatic conveniences. The Pioneer, slow and plain, was judged obsolete by the standards it had made possible. But obsolescence is not extinction. In depots and workshops, its blueprints influenced everything that followed. Design for maintenance, overbuilt drivetrains, modular repair. Even obsolescence carried its utility forward. In the end, its hidden consequence was moral as well as mechanical. It demonstrated that endurance has value beyond spectacle, that preservation is as heroic as destruction. The Pioneers that rusted quietly in surplus yards had already altered the industrial soul of a nation. They proved that victory is measured not only in what one conquers, but in what one keeps. When peace returned, the Scammell Pioneer lingered like a veteran unsure of retirement. At depots across Europe, rows of them stood silent beneath tarpaulins, paint faded, tires cracked. Some were scrapped, some sold, others cannibalized for parts. Yet a few kept working, steadfast, ageless, indifferent to circumstance. In the early 1950s, Britain's engineers revisited the concept and produced the Scammell Explorer, a direct descendant recognizable at once. The same tall stance, the same mechanical honesty, refined but not reinvented. It carried the DNA of the Pioneer into a new age of hydraulics and post-war pragmatism. The Explorer's six-wheel frame and recovery spade mirrored the old design almost bolt for bolt. Those who had served with Pioneers recognized it instantly, and the name Scammell again became shorthand for resilience. Civilian life, too, had room for such persistence. Many ex-Army Pioneers found second lives as recovery trucks on Britain's growing road network. Painted in bright commercial colours, they rescued buses and lorries where once they had towed tanks. Others ventured abroad, to Africa, Australia and India, dragging industrial equipment through jungles and deserts just as they had in wartime. One famous example, captured in this photograph of a restored Scammell at a vintage show, gleams under sunlight with its wartime markings carefully preserved. It stands not as nostalgia, but as proof that honest engineering does not expire. At museums from Bovington to Duxford, the Pioneer now rests beneath fluorescent light, flanked by the very machines it once saved. Children climb its tires, veterans nod quietly. To most visitors it is an unfamiliar name, but to those who understand logistics, it is a monument to the unseen half of war. Its legacy lives not just in preserved metal, but in practice, in every recovery truck, every engineering doctrine that prizes repairability over novelty. The Pioneer proved that reliability is not a lack of ambition, but its fulfillment, the kind of strength that makes progress possible. Its lines endure, bonnet like a brow, tires like muscle, a silhouette unashamed of function. It is what Britain built best, a thing made to serve, that served so well it outlasted its purpose. In a forgotten yard, a single Scammell Pioneer rests beneath weeds, its paint the colour of dry earth. The winch cable hangs loose, the glass long gone, the nameplate still legible. Time has done what the war could not. It has stopped it. Yet even motionless it speaks. The dents are memories, the rust a record. It carries in its silence the echo of every task, the pull through the mire, the climb up a rain-slicked incline, the tug of a tank that would otherwise have been lost. In photographs from 1942, the same outline appears. Bonnet bowed under heat haze, dust trailing behind as it drags another casualty of war towards survival. That image and the relic before us are the same story told in different tenses. One shows labour, the other its residue. The Scammell Pioneer represents the dignity of the necessary. It reminds us that the triumphs of modernity depend upon the humble mechanics of persistence. It was not built to fight, but to serve those that did, and in that service it achieved a kind of quiet immortality. Every war creates its icons. the fighters, the tanks, the names written into myth. Yet history's true endurance lies with those that ensured the myths could move. The pioneer remains that endurance made visible, a machine that turned failure into motion and motion into victory. It is, even now, the relentless giant of its age.